But I think everyone in this band and people have been in
Most guarded secrets. For years, fans only saw the glamorous side of the group, the hits, the tours, and the fame. But behind the stage lights were heartbreak, betrayal, and emotional chaos that nearly destroyed everything they built. In early 2025, something unexpected happened. Mick Fleetwood and former bandmate Lindsey Buckingham were seen together again in a studio, sparking rumors of a reunion. But what they talked about wasn't just music. According to Mick, it was a conversation about forgiveness, mistakes, and the painful truth behind Fleetwood Mac's turbulent history. For the first time, Mick admitted that the band's success came at a heavy personal cost. He revealed how fame pushed friendships to the edge, and how his complicated bond with Stevie Nicks changed the course of his life, and the band's destiny, forever. At just 15, Mick dropped out of school to chase his dream. His parents, surprisingly supportive, believed in his talent. He moved to London, one of the most exciting music cities in the world at the time. There, he struggled to survive, often sleeping on the floor of his sister's apartment in Notting Hill. But London's music scene was alive with energy. He soon joined local bands and gained a reputation as a reliable and passionate drummer. One of his early breaks came when he joined the Shames and later the Bow Street Runners. His big moment, however, came in 1967, when he joined John Mayall and the Bluesbreakers, one of the top British blues bands. That's where he met John McVie, a bassist who would later become his lifelong bandmate. Though he was eventually fired for his drinking habits, that setback led to something greater: the creation of a new band with guitarist Peter Green and McVie. They called it Fleetwood Mac, combining Mick's and John's names. What began as a small blues project would soon become one of the biggest bands in music history. In 1967, Fleetwood Mac made their debut and quickly caught attention with their raw blues sound. Their first album, released in 1968, was a hit in the UK, proving that audiences were ready for something fresh. Their early success was built on skill and passion rather than promotion. As the band grew, new members joined, including the talented keyboardist Christine Perfect, later Christine McVie, and young guitarist Danny Kerwin. The group experimented with new sounds, moving from blues to rock and psychedelic influences. Songs like Albatross and Oh Well became classics, but with fame came tension. In 1970, tragedy struck when guitarist Peter Green suffered a mental breakdown after a bad LSD experience and left the band. His departure was a huge emotional loss. Soon after, another member, Jeremy Spencer, disappeared in Los Angeles and joined a religious cult. Through all the chaos, Mick Fleetwood remained the steady heartbeat of the group, determined to keep the band alive no matter what happened. He had no idea that even more personal storms were on the horizon. After so many lineup changes, the band seemed lost. But fate intervened again. In 1975, Mick met two young musicians, Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham. He had heard their song, Frozen Love, and was struck by their chemistry. When their previous guitarist left, Mick invited the pair to join Fleetwood Mac. That decision changed everything. The new lineup, Mick, John, Christine, Lindsey, and Stevie, created a magic that no one could have predicted. Their 1975 self-titled album Fleetwood Mac became a massive hit, with songs like Rhiannon and Landslide turning Stevie Nicks into a superstar. Her mystical voice and poetic lyrics gave the band a new identity. But behind the beauty of their music, cracks were forming. Lindsey and Stevie's relationship was falling apart, and Christine and John McVie's marriage was collapsing too. Mick tried to hold everyone together, but even he couldn't stop what was coming. The success that brought them fame also brought heartbreak, jealousy, and betrayal. When the band started recording their next album, Rumors, in 1976, everything was falling apart. Mick's wife had left him for one of his friends. Stevie and Lindsey were constantly fighting. Christine had moved on from John and was dating the band's lighting director. The studio became a battlefield of emotions, fueled by exhaustion and cocaine use. Yet somehow, out of that pain, they created one of the greatest albums ever made. Rumors became a masterpiece of heartbreak. Every lyric, every note came from real-life drama. Lindsey wrote Go Your Own Way about Stevie. Stevie responded with Dreams, which became the band's only #1 single. Christine's Don't Stop was her message of hope amid chaos. Mick later revealed that the sessions were pure madness. We were falling apart, but the music kept us alive, he said. The album sold over 40 million copies and won a Grammy for Album of the Year. But behind the success, the wounds only grew deeper. The band was trapped in fame, love, and emotional pain. As the chaos continued, Mick and Stevie developed a relationship of their own. It started as friendship, two people trying to survive in a storm of emotions. But as the tension with Lindsey grew, Mick found comfort in Stevie's presence. Their affair shocked everyone, including the rest of the band. Stevie later said that it was one of the biggest mistakes of her life. But Mick saw it differently. For him, it was a connection formed out of loneliness and pain. In his recent reflections, Mick admitted that their relationship nearly destroyed the band. "We were already on fire," he said, "and that made the flames higher." Their secret affair didn't last long, but it changed everything. Stevie began to distance herself emotionally, focusing more on her solo career. Mick, meanwhile, was left trying to repair the broken pieces of both his personal life and the band's fragile unity. It was a time of guilt, confusion, and survival, and those feelings still lingered decades later. Despite all the turmoil, Fleetwood Mac refused to give up. After Rumors, they released Tusk in 1979, an ambitious and experimental album that cost a fortune to make. Although it didn't reach the same commercial success, it proved the band's creative courage. By 1982, they found their groove again with Mirage, and once more in 1987 with Tango in the Night. But success couldn't heal their personal wounds. Lindsay eventually left the band after heated arguments, and Stevie followed later. Mick was left trying to hold together what felt like a family constantly tearing itself apart. Over the years, there were countless reunions, separations, and tours, each one reminding fans that the bond between these musicians was both magical and destructive. Mick often said that Fleetwood Mac was like a marriage that could never end, full of love, anger, and history. "We've all hurt each other," he once confessed, "but we also made something that will outlive all of us." As the years passed, the wild days of Fleetwood Mac began to fade. The members went their separate ways, but the memories, good and bad, remained. In 2022, the band lost Christine McVie, a devastating blow to everyone. Mick called her death a heartbreak beyond words. He said that it made him think deeply about forgiveness and the time that had passed. He reconnected with old bandmates, including Stevie and Lindsay, who hadn't spoken in years. It was during these emotional reunions that Mick began to share his truth publicly. He admitted that the band's success was built on love and pain in equal measure. He said Stevie Nicks' strength kept the band alive even when everything else fell apart. But he also acknowledged that the choices they made, the affairs, the addictions, the lies, left permanent scars. At 78, Mick finally felt ready to let go of the secrets that haunted him for decades. In his recent interviews, Mick Fleetwood revealed that his greatest regret was not the chaos, but the silence. For years, he avoided talking about the real reasons behind Fleetwood Mac's turmoil. But now, he admits that the band's downfall came not from fame or pressure, but from emotional confusion and pride. He confessed that he and Stevie never truly healed from their affair. It always lingered in the background, shaping the way they worked and interacted. "We all loved each other in our own broken ways," Mick said, "but none of us knew how to say it out loud." For years, people believed that Fleetwood Mac's internal struggles were over. But Mick Fleetwood had something he had kept inside for decades, something that he finally revealed when he turned 78. During a quiet interview, Mick admitted that the relationships within the band had left lasting scars, and that he had once been part of a secret that almost destroyed his friendship with Stevie Nicks. The world had long heard rumors about affairs, heartbreak, and jealousy. But hearing Mick finally speak about it in his calm, reflective tone made it real. He confessed that he and Stevie had a brief romantic relationship during the height of Fleetwood Mac's fame, a secret that was hidden from the public for years. Both were broken people at the time, seeking comfort in someone who truly understood their pain. But when their secret came to light within the band, it only added to the chaos that was already tearing them apart. Stevie Nicks later confirmed that their relationship had indeed happened, but she described it as something that was beautiful and tragic at the same time. It wasn't about love in the traditional sense. It was about two people who had been through too much and simply needed to feel seen. This revelation shocked fans who had only ever seen the band through the lens of their music. Behind the glamorous stage lights and the #1 hits, there was a deep, emotional storm that none of them could escape. Mick said that he felt guilty for years, not because of what happened, but because of how it affected everyone around him. He admitted that the guilt stayed with him, and even decades later, it was something that made him reflect on what fame can do to relationships. Even after everything that happened, Fleetwood Mac continued to perform and make music. What is most surprising is that despite the emotional wounds, the members could still come together to create beautiful songs that moved millions. Mick Fleetwood said in interviews that music was the only thing that held them together. It was like therapy, a way to communicate feelings they could not express in words. When you listen to songs like The Chain, you can hear the pain, anger, and love all mixed together. Those lyrics were not just poetry. They were the band's way of speaking to each other when conversations failed. Stevie Nicks once said that she could never truly hate anyone in the band, because every song reminded her of what they had survived together. But working together after so much betrayal was never easy. There were moments when Stevie refused to speak to Lindsay, and Mick had to act like the father figure who tried to keep everyone calm. In truth, he admitted he was often just as lost as the rest of them. There were days when the tension in the studio was so thick that people would walk out in tears. Yet, somehow, they would return the next day and finish recording another song that would become a classic. This strange bond between them, love, anger, forgiveness, and art, is what kept Fleetwood Mac alive. It was not peace that held them together. It was music. Mick Fleetwood said it best. We were a family, but a broken one. Still, even broken families can create something beautiful. As the years passed, Mick Fleetwood's personal life continued to reflect the chaos of his band. His financial problems became public when he filed for bankruptcy in the 1980s, despite having sold millions of albums. It was a humbling experience for him, one that forced him to look at his life from a different angle. He had spent years chasing success, but now he was facing the reality of what that success had cost him. Fame had brought him everything, and taken everything away at the same time. Mick later said that the bankruptcy taught him a painful but valuable lesson. Money and fame cannot heal emotional wounds. What mattered most was finding peace within himself. His relationships also suffered. His marriage fell apart, and his connection with Stevie Nicks, while still friendly, was never the same after their brief romance. In his autobiography, Mick wrote that he had made mistakes that he would always regret, but he also believed that those experiences shaped the man he became. He learned to forgive himself, and that was not easy. In many ways, Fleetwood Mac was not just a band, it was a reflection of his life. The highs and lows, the beauty and the pain, were all part of the same story. Looking back, Mick said that if he could change one thing, he would have been more honest with himself and with those he loved. But at the same time, he admitted that without all those mistakes, Fleetwood Mac might never have created the music that defined a generation. Years later, when the band reunited for several tours, fans saw something that touched their hearts, a sense of peace between the members. Mick Fleetwood, Stevie Nicks, and even Lindsey Buckingham seemed to have finally accepted their past. The smiles on stage were real, but they carried decades of memories behind them. Mick said that time had softened the pain and turned it into understanding. We went through hell, he said, but we came out stronger. Not as the same people, but as survivors. Stevie also spoke warmly of Mick, calling him the anchor of Fleetwood Mac, the one who kept the band alive when everyone else was ready to give up. When they performed Landslide or The Chain in front of thousands of people, you could see tears in their eyes. It was no longer just about the songs. It was about their shared journey. Every lyric, every note carried the story of love, betrayal, and forgiveness. And that's what made their performances so emotional. Even though Mick and Stevie had moved on in their personal lives, there was still a quiet bond between them. It wasn't romantic anymore, but it was built on respect and shared pain. The secrets Mick exposed weren't meant to shame anyone. They were his way of closing a chapter, of freeing himself from the silence that had followed him for so many years. Now, at 78, Mick Fleetwood stands as one of the few people who has truly seen both the light and the darkness of fame. He has watched his friends fall apart, his band almost collapse, and yet he has also seen how music can heal. In his later years, he has become a mentor figure to many younger artists who see him as a symbol of endurance. He often tells them that success means nothing if you lose your soul along the way. He encourages musicians to remember why they started, for the love of creating, not for money or fame. When he speaks about Fleetwood Mac now, his voice carries wisdom and calm. He doesn't talk with anger or sadness anymore. He talks with acceptance. Mick has said that he will always be proud of Stevie Nicks, calling her one of the greatest songwriters and performers to ever live. Despite all the pain and drama, his respect for her never faded. He understands that what they went through was part of a bigger story, one that touched millions. Today, when people listen to Fleetwood Mac, they don't just hear music. They hear human emotions turned into